Katie Colleen here. Welcome back, Colleen Clan, or if you are new, come join the family. We're making something today. This time for sure, we're actually going to make something. We're about halfway through the year now, and I have only really made one costume from scratch this year. If I'm gonna be, fair to myself, that one costume I did make was pretty extravagant, and I also have been very busy this year with events, conventions, video projects and such, but I'm still looking back at what I've done this year and I'm like, what did I even make? I still love making costumes though, that's why I do this, so I had a very honest conversation with my brain about what I really wanted to make, what project could I do that would revive some of that passion. And when I'm looking for inspiration, a lot of times I look at the media I am currently consuming at the time, which right now is Monster High. I know it's a bit of a deviation from the pink fairy princess moments I've been having lately, but I do feel Monster High is pretty adjacent to some of the other shows I watch, like Rainbow High. And quite honestly, I don't terribly like or dislike any of the characters. There's no one character that speaks to me. I didn't watch it and be like, wow, that's Colleen. But there was an outfit that spoke to me. So we are going to be making a Fearleading uniform. I didn't realize when I bought the pom-poms the listing was only for one pom-pom and not two, so I'm waiting for the other one to come in the mail currently. And I do think I will probably choose a character later to wear to a con, but for now, I'm just gonna make this cute little dress for me because that's what my brain says it wants. Okay, patterns and materials. I wanted to try and keep this pretty simple so I wouldn't get burnt out, so I bought myself a pattern. I definitely wanted to go more old school cheerleader with this outfit than modern cheer. I did look at a few different styles of cheerleading uniforms, and modern day cheerleading uniforms are mostly spandex and more mini skirt than pleated skirts. And I also didn't want a separate top and skirt. I wanted a dress. I wanted much more fitted, kind of non-stretch uniform. So these fabrics all have very little stretch to them. They have about 2 to 3% spandex, and they have a really good weight. It feels very uniform fabric, a good drape to it. I think that's everything. Let's get started on the lining layer, or as I like to call it, the high risk mock-up layer, because I'm not making a mock-up for this. Let's talk pattern alterations. So modern patterns will generally come with a range of sizes included in the pattern. This pattern is from the 80s, and it only has one size, and that is a 25-inch waist. Now, I do happen to be a 25-inch waist, so that's good news, but I do not trust this pattern. I am working with a non-stretch fabric, so if it is too small, I gotta restart, and I don't want that for myself. So erring on the side of caution, I added 1/4 inch to all the pattern pieces. I just figured as long as I got this dress just a little bit bigger, I could size it back down when I try it on. I also added some length to the skirt. These Monster High skirts are very short pleated mini skirts, and I don't know if you've ever worn a short pleated mini skirt in a wheelchair, but it just isn't as flattering. It doesn't look the same. Other than all those alterations, it's all pretty straightforward, just sewing all the pattern pieces together. I have some ideas of where I went wrong here, but it's hard to believe I got this far wrong. Look at this. You could really fit 2 of me in this dress. So I added 1/4 inch to all the pattern pieces. That alone I don't think would do it. This pattern had about 1/2 inch worth of seam allowance accounted for. I added 1/4 inch, I only used 1/4 inch of the 1/2 inch, so in total, worst case scenario, I added 1/2 inch to each seam. So the only thing I can think to get going back in the correct direction with this project is I'm gonna take in all the seams on this dress by 1/2 inch. That should effectively undo any modifications I did to try and make this a bit bigger. what have we learned from our high risk mock-up layer? And the risk was not good this time. So for the outside layer, my current plan is to cut out the pattern piece as is, or maybe a 1/4 inch smaller. Before we start sewing any of the pieces of the outside layer together, we need to talk about the Monster High logo. Welcome back to Cooking with Colleen. Today we have some delicious Monster High soup on the menu. The Monster High logo is kind of a white to pink ombre, so I want to try and dye that. This is overall a fairly simple costume, so I'm just going like really hard on the details. What I'm gonna do is I have this like on a hook hanger, and I'm gonna kind of like dip it in so that I have like a transition. And that's how it's supposed to work. I don't know if it'll actually work. Here's how our ombre dye turned out. This is the test strip, so you can see it's kind of like, it's not perfectly white at the top. And these are my good strips from the second dye bath I did. Not bad for my first ombre dye. I was really hoping with this build that it'd be a project that could come together pretty quickly, but that I could also kind of really get into some of the details like the ombre dyeing and stuff. So it's not so boring that I lose interest, but it's not so challenging that I give up either. So, ta-da! I think that looks really good! So this, I can just spray onto the back of the logo and stick it, and it will temporarily stick it to the top. And then it should hold its place long enough for me to put a stabilizer on the back and stitch this down. Then we can get into our cool satin stitch applique thing. I'm not really gonna go into much detail on how I do the applique because I've done it so many times on this channel. Basically, just a really tight zigzag stitch. What's next is going to be cutting out all the other pieces of our outside layer, sewing that together. Once I, for sure, absolutely for sure, have the sizing how I want it, I want to serge and then top stitch the seams. And once you serge and top stitch something, it's really, really hard to rip it out and go back. So I took a little break from this costume. I took a week off to go guest at Mid-Valley Comic Art Expo in Salem. So I'm just getting back to it now. And as you can see, my second pom came in the mail. So next I'll be making the little lightning bolt details at the waist, the trim on the skirt, the lightning bolt at the collar. And while I am sketching out that lightning bolt detail, I want to share some stories with you guys about when I was a cheerleader. So I'm going to take some black cotton fabric and lay it over where the lightning bolt will go. And I'm going to sketch the lightning bolt on the fabric. So first of all, backstory, if you don't actually know me, I have not been disabled my whole life. I only started having symptoms when I was in high school. So back when I was in elementary grade school, I was enrolled in gymnastics, dance, and cheer. And fun fact, I also did sewing lessons at this time, but I actually like kind of turned my nose up at sewing. Like I thought it was kind of lame, which is really sad because in my adult life, obviously I sew a lot. And I do not remember much from my days where I was in cheer classes. All I remember is I was always the pyramid topper, okay? The person on top of the pyramid is called the flyer. And all I remember from these cheer practices is I was always put on the pyramids. And the thing is, at least like with my experience with cheer, is the flyer is seen as like a kind of coveted position. Like you're really cool if you're a flyer. The interesting part is being a flyer seemed to have much less to do with skill and much more with just being a small person, right? So if you were the smallest person on the team, you got to be the pyramid topper, and I've just always been really small. I ended up getting very long, I'm like tall, but I've always just been a very small person. So I was the pyramid topper, and I was kind of terrified being a pyramid topper. I didn't mind when the girls had their hands like down low and were holding my feet, or even when they had it like here, like they'll hold their hands like this and my foot would sit in their hands. But then you also do this move where they extend their hands up and my foot is in their hands, my little foot, and I was terrified. I was so scared to go to the extension level of the cheer pyramid. So I ended up quitting cheer, but I actually did more cheer stuff in high school, just not like officially with a team. So there was this one summer in high school where all we did was like hang out at the pool. My friends were in cheer, so I didn't do cheer at the time, but my friends did. And it seemed like every single weekend for a whole summer, we'd go to the pool and we'd make cheer pyramids in the pool. And I, again, was always the pyramid topper because I was the smallest. So they'd always put me on their cheer pyramids and I'd jump off into the water or whatever. Just, you know, kids being kids. And while it was terrifying when I was younger, when I did it, you know, high school age with my friends in the pool, it was a lot of fun. So that's the cheer story. Anyways, I'm gonna finish sketching this out and cutting this out, and then we can start making our zigzag applique. I was feeling pretty good about this until it wasn't working, and now it's not so great. First of all, I went with an inch thick for our little zigzags, and I think that's too much. I think an inch is too much. Second mistake, apparently this white is supposed to like sit inside the pink, so I'm gonna need to shave this down. I feel like it could be half as big. I think half an inch wide would be fine. So I'm gonna go about half the size. With the zigzags, my biggest concern is that they wouldn't be straight. Like they'd kind of like veer off to one side. So I wanted to do everything with a straight stitch to make sure everything was in the right place, and that in the back seam, it like meets together in the same place. So we've reached the buying merch part of my Monster High face. But in my defense, this cup has my boy on it. Look at him! At the start of this video, I think I said something like I don't really have a favorite character from Monster High. But then I met my wheelchair fish boy, and he's my favorite. So there is actually like a good amount of disability rep in Monster High, but this character uses what looks like a mobility aid in our world, not just in the monster world, and that's a wheelchair. So he is a giant buff mohawk fishman that uses a flame decorated wheelchair. How could you not love that? And look, I'm not saying he's the best disability rep ever. He has hardly any screen time, and I have my critiques, but how could you not love the buff wheelchair fishman? Okay, so I had to buy this cup. So the goal for today, I would like to add the trim on the bottom of the skirt. There's two like straight pink and white lines, and I'm just gonna use those with bias tape. The applique stitching takes forever, and I'm running out of my applique thread. So I'm just gonna make some bias tape and stick that on the bottom, and then we'll move on to doing the neckline. I will have to do one more zigzag on the neckline and attach the outside and lining layers together. I am doing the animated version of this outfit, and that has the zigzag on the neckline. If you look at the dolls, they just have a straight neckline, which would be easier. It would be much easier, but I want to try the zigzag neckline. Yep, even after going through all the zigzag pain yesterday, I want to try it. Welcome to weekend 3 of my Monster High Fearleading build. I was a fool to ever think I could have gotten this done sooner than 3 weeks. But this weekend, we're gonna finish for sure. So the first thing I want to tackle is gonna be the armholes. I think it's actually gonna be easier to do that before I add the zipper in the back. So I think I'll finish these off with bias tape. It's just a really pretty and clean way to finish off rough edges. So I'll be cutting out some bias tape from the black fabric and using that. Then I can throw the zipper in the back. And of course I'm using one of these zippers with the really big zipper pull, and that is so I can use my adaptive tool to help me get zipped in and out of this costume independently. And the very last thing to do is going to be hemming the skirt. The dress is done, finally. But before we get to the reveal, I want to talk a little bit about the character I am cosplaying. When I started this project, I did not have any particular girl I wanted to cosplay. I just knew I wanted to make the Fearleading uniform. And I figured I would just decide later what character I wanted to do when I planned on taking this to a con. Later is now. So I'm planning on taking this costume to CoronecoCon next month, and so I had to choose a character, and I chose Draculara! The reason I chose Draculara, 2 reasons actually. First of all, she is simply the path of least resistance. She has the least number of accessories or prosthetics. I feel like I can get away without doing body paint on her and just going a little bit heavy on the blush. So she's just the easiest to do. All I had to do was buy a wig. This is from Uniwigs. And I have not bought from them before, but this had like really good reviews. Second reason, I bought the Draculara shoes from the Why Are You Monster High collab, and they cost $200. So even though Draculara doesn't wear those shoes with her Fearleading outfit, she does now. I'm going to find every single opportunity I can to wear those shoes when they get here. I got them on pre-order, and they're not actually going to show up until the end of July, so I need a stand-in pair of shoes until they arrive. I'm thinking these will work just for, you know, the next month or so while I wait for my very expensive Draculara shoes. These are also Why Are You shoes. So that is all of our accessories and other pieces, and the pom-poms, which you've seen probably more than you wanted to in this video already. So I think it's time for the final reveal. Final thoughts on Fearleading uniform as Miss Draculara. I think this was the perfect project for what I needed. I was feeling just really not a lot of crafting motivation. I was feeling kind of burnt out. I hadn't made anything in a long time, and I think this was the perfect project. And it was also super cool just to like look back on me doing cheer and dance in middle school and kind of trying to like remember some of that. I came up with a cheer routine for a little music video thing. This was just a really fun creative project to get me back into the swing of things, and I think it was a success. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!